Welcome to Climate Quickies, bite-sized nuggets of climate goodness from our TEDxLondon experts in under 5 minutes.
In this week's Climate Curious, we're talking badvertising. We all like to think that we're immune to advertising, but the effects of greenwashing are real. Someone who's setting that straight is Francesca Willow, an artist and activist who's part of the badvertising campaign. They recently launched a campaign challenging the world's biggest ad firm, WPP, for strengthening the social license for the world's worst polluters to keep on polluting. From big oil to plastics, to airlines to SUVs, WPP's agencies promote some of the most harmful products, all whilst hiding the true damage that these products can cause to people and the planet. On stopping the adverts that are fueling pollution and climate change, let's head over to Francesca to learn more about badvertising. Stay curious.
Hello, my name is Francesca Willow. I am an artist and a climate justice activist, and I specifically focus on trying to tackle greenwashing and misleading information from high carbon industries, and also trying to remove the fossil fuel industry from kind of arts and culture spaces. So we've just launched a new campaign essentially targeted at WPP. For those who haven't heard that name before, WPP is a holding company, which means they own loads of different advertising and PR firms. So they are currently the largest ad firm in the world because they own so many different firms underneath them, some whose names you might not know, but campaigns you might know. So for instance, they own Ogilvy, who invented the idea of the personal carbon footprint for BP in the early 2000s. Or they own VML, who did a bunch of ads for Shell a few years ago that were banned by the UK regulator. So they are the main company behind a lot of the ads that we might see. They work for some of the world's top polluters, some of their clients, both in terms of straight oil and gas companies, Shell, BP, ones like that, but also other forms of pollution. So they work with the top 3 plastic polluters in the world. They have an entire agency that just looks after Coca-Cola. They work with some of the main banks that finance fossil fuels. They work for huge car clients who have aggressively advertised and marketed SUVs and have been very pivotal to the growth in SUVs and therefore the growth in oil demand that's caused. And also aviation clients, so clients that encourage people to take longer flights and potentially fly when they could do other kinds of journeys. Our argument essentially is through promoting these polluting clients, through working for them, they are frustrating the objectives of their own climate commitments. They have committed to not work with companies that frustrate the objectives of the Paris Agreement, but obviously through working with clients who are actively expanding, actively polluting, and show no signs of slowing down, they're going against their own policies. So badvertising has a couple of different strands that we focus on. If you go back a couple of decades, we all know tobacco advertising was everywhere, not just in terms of like the ads we see, but also in terms of sponsorship. So tobacco used to be a major sponsor of sports because we kind of work on advertising and we also look at things like sponsorships. And the argument at the time was like, you can't ban these ads, you can't ban these sponsorships, the world of sport's going to fall apart. Like, we are integral to all these ways that the world works. That ban was put into place. And, well, one, things like sport continued to exist. They still do now. And also, smoking did go down. And then in the aftermath of that, we saw more and more regulation come in around smoking over the years. So things like the indoor smoking ban and things like that. And we are hoping to pursue something similar because obviously there is a level of things that people have to do because of the society that we live in right now. So people aren't going to stop driving cars overnight. You know, there's levels of policy and systemic change that needs to come. But at the bare minimum, we shouldn't be advertising and expanding these things and encouraging people to use them more, because it's not really about, for us, it's not about telling people what to do, but it's about curbing the influence that these massive companies and advertisers are having that shape the choices we make. So it's about how they shape culture, not sort of beating individual people with a stick. obviously fossil fuel companies, the way they're advertising is a lot more about making you think that they're important and necessary. They're not necessarily advertising like buy our oil, but they're advertising in a way that makes you think that they're the good guys, they're part of the answer, they're working towards the solution while they're investing like minuscule amounts into renewables and cutting back on climate pledges. But through that advertising, they're obviously avoiding a level of accountability that we need, a level of change that we need. So it's about trying to change the culture, and that is through these ad bans. I think we all like to think that we are immune from advertising and we are, we're smart and we won't be hoodwinked by that. But the research, unfortunately, just doesn't back that up. I think actually probably SUVs is the best example that we have of this, because it's kind of like a perfect microcosm of this industry at large, which is all these car makers realize they can make SUVs for almost exactly like the same amount of money as all their other cars, but they can market them as these luxury vehicles and they can charge a much higher markup and make way more money on them. But most people don't need cars that big, right? Apart from the people in the depths of rural Cornwall, although ironically where I live, there's not many SUVs because our roads are very small. But it's not really required, especially in a city, to have these giant mega cars. So they have to think about a strategy to shift the public narrative and the consensus around them in order for them to make money. So they work with marketing, advertising companies. And through that, we have seen a massive rise in SUVs compared to 10 years ago. And there's a mix of things. They market them as more safe, even though they're not more safe. They're actually much more likely to roll. And drivers inside them drive much more dangerously. They also market them ironically as this way to connect with nature. And you see all these ads of like a car driving past a waterfall and through the woods and down a beach, all while these cars are actually, if SUVs were a country, they were the fifth highest emitter in the world. They are I think the International Energy Agency said they were responsible essentially for the largest growth in oil demand a couple of years ago. So half of this is trying to shift attitudes and like en masse. And I think the other half is like normalizing industries that we need to sort of cease existing. We need fossil fuel extraction to stop. And so they're not trying to individually sell you like a bucket of oil, but they are trying to make it seem like they are sort of an immutable constant in society. So we want the ad industry on side. We want the industry to wake up to how much damage this is causing, because I'm sure a lot of people listening to this already know this, but like we can't make this argument for short-term profit if we're not going to have a planet to live on in 30 years. Like it's completely redundant. So hopefully some long-term thinking and some engagement there. But I think longer term, we'd love to see that regulation coming through that is sort of more of a tobacco style blanket ban. Go to badverts.org/WPP. You can sign up to the newsletter, and through there, we'll obviously send out actions as and when they happen, because there are also a lot of local groups for people who advocate around this in their local town councils with their local MP, which is what we saw happen in Edinburgh. We are also on all the social medias. You can find us there. And I think we'll just be keeping people updated as the process goes on.
Thanks for listening to this quickie.
This episode was created by our superstar podcast team at TEDxLondon. Until next time,
stay curious.